Power arises when an individual's presence or position causes others to alter their behavior, thereby enabling that individual to influence the actions and decisions of others. Within organizations, power therefore has a direct impact on ethical decision-making. In particular, when employees' personal ethical values conflict with the expectations or demands of superiors. The superior's power may force employees to choose between upholding ethical principles and complying with orders. Power not only affects individuals but also shapes corporate culture. The way leaders exercise power, whether fairly and transparently or in an authoritarian and coercive manner, tends to diffuse throughout the organization and become a shared behavioral norm. However, power also carries the risk of fostering arrogance and is susceptible to abuse or misuse, especially in the absence of effective control mechanisms and critical oversight. Therefore, the responsible use of power, grounded in ethical values, is a key condition for building a healthy corporate culture. Power shapes corporate culture insofar as leaders can use their authority to require employees to conform to organizational norms and cultural expectations. Failure to comply may result in sanctions or punishment. This fear of negative consequences compels employees to practice the prescribed corporate culture, thereby allowing corporate culture to be established and reinforced in the direction desired by leadership. Rewards are a powerful form of authority used to regulate and guide the behavior of others. In practice, many individuals act primarily because they seek certain benefits, such as higher wages, bonuses, promotion opportunities, or recognition. Consequently, employees tend to work harder and exert greater effort when they perceive a clear link between the effort they invest and the rewards they receive. Generally, rewards are understood as a form of compensation or reciprocation for an individual's contributions, including time, effort, and professional competence. For example, effective performance is compensated with appropriate pay, and strong achievements are rewarded with promotion opportunities. From this perspective, rewarding performance is both reasonable and necessary, as employees deserve returns commensurate with their contributions. However, reward systems can also create ethical risks if they are poorly designed or improperly implemented. In some cases, when rewards are excessively large or focused solely on short-term outcomes, employees may disregard the means by which results are achieved. For instance, incentive schemes based exclusively on short-term sales targets may encourage dishonest behavior, inappropriate pressure on customers, or the concealment of information. In such situations, rewards inadvertently become incentives for unethical conduct. The impact of reward mechanisms on ethical behavior can be illustrated through the example of Toyota and Kia. If the commission paid for each vehicle sold is the same, for instance, a uniform bonus of 5.000.000 VND per car, sales staff are not under pressure to prioritize selling a particular brand or model. In this situation, employees can advise customers based on their genuine needs and preferences, such as vehicle condition, brand preference, or suitability for the intended purpose of use. By contrast, if the commission for selling Kia vehicles is higher than that for Toyota, sales staff may face a conflict of interest, even if they are aware that Toyota vehicles may offer better quality or durability. Many employees may implicitly prioritize recommending Kia vehicles for personal gain. In the most ethical scenario, employees with strong integrity will still provide full and transparent information about both brands, allowing customers to make an informed choice. However, in practice, there is also a risk that some employees may engage in misrepresentation or concealment of information in order to sell the vehicle associated with higher commission. In such cases, employees' motivation is driven primarily by financial rewards rather than by the best interests of customers. In contrast to reward power is coercive power, which refers to the use of punishment or sanctions to regulate behavior rather than encouraging it through rewards. In many cases, individuals comply with demands not because they believe the actions are right, but because they fear being punished. In certain situations, leaders may use coercive power to force employees to engage in unethical behavior. Even when employees recognize that such actions are wrong, they may still comply out of fear of negative consequences if they disobey. In these cases, the leader's use of power becomes an indirect cause of unethical conduct. In terms of effectiveness, coercive power often produces immediate short-term compliance, but it is largely unsustainable in the long run because it fails to foster internal commitment or moral self-regulation. This form of power is more commonly observed in organizations or societies characterized by high power distance, where hierarchy and obedience are strongly emphasized. When coercive power is used frequently, organizational relationships are likely to be damaged over time. Employees who work primarily out of fear of punishment tend to lose trust, engagement, and commitment to the organization. Rather than collaborating and contributing, they may seek protection from those with greater authority, form informal factions, or choose to leave the organization when better opportunities arise. This can become a serious problem, as coercive work environments often encourage silence, defensive behavior, and concealment, rather than honesty and accountability. Employees may hesitate to speak up about wrongdoing or to challenge unethical decisions for fear of retaliation. Consequently, the excessive use of coercive power not only undermines corporate culture but also increases the risk of unethical behavior within the organization. This example clearly illustrates the negative impact of coercive power on ethical decision-making within organizations. In this situation, a high-value customer requests that a sales employee provide a bribe in order to maintain the business relationship. The employee is fully aware that such an action is unethical and may also violate the law, however. They are placed in a position of coercion when the owner insists on satisfying the customer. The pressure comes not only from the customer but also from the leader's use of power, as the owner links compliance with the unethical act to opportunities for promotion or the risk of dismissal. In this case, the owner imposes a coercive order, forcing the employee to choose between personal ethical principles and job. Legitimate power refers to the belief that an individual has the right to influence others solely by virtue of holding a formal position or job title, and that subordinates therefore have an obligation to accept and comply with orders issued by that authority. This type of power is particularly evident in organizations with centralized structures, where decision-making authority is concentrated at the top. It is also commonly observed in organizations led by charismatic leaders, where employees comply not only because of formal authority but also due to the leader's personal influence. However, when leaders fail to respect subordinates and abuse legitimate power by exerting excessive pressure, employees gradually lose the space to express opinions, voice concerns, or engage in critical discussion. In such contexts, instead of relying on internal dialogue, some employees may resort to whistleblowing as a means of self-protection and resistance against perceived injustice. This behavior is a clear indicator that the organization's ethical culture is deteriorating. Expert power arises from specialized knowledge, professional competence, experience, and deep understanding of a particular field. When an individual possesses knowledge, skills, or experience that others lack or have not yet acquired, this generates trust and respect, thereby leading others to follow that person's guidance or recommendations. This form of influence is known as expert power. Expert power does not depend on hierarchical position within an organization. For example, a secretary or junior employee who has worked in an organization for many years and has a thorough understanding of its procedures, culture, and operational practices may exert significant influence by advising managers or proposing solutions that improve organizational effectiveness and even enhance revenue. Similarly, a librarian may possess expert power relative to others because of their expertise in organizing and managing library resources efficiently. In general, expert power is closely associated with an individual's professional strengths and accumulated experience. However, expert power can also be misused or abused. Some leaders or highly skilled individuals may exploit others' lack of experience or knowledge to manipulate or pressure them into engaging in ethically questionable or unethical behavior. In such cases, trust in expertise itself becomes a source of ethical risk within the organization. Referent power arises when an individual perceives that their goals, values, or interests are aligned with those of another person. When both parties feel that they are like-minded, They tend to influence one another and offer mutual support in order to engage in actions that help both sides achieve their objectives. In this case, power does not stem from coercion or rewards, but rather from consensus and voluntary commitment. For this form of power to be truly effective, there must be a degree of psychological and value alignment, such as similarity in ethical perspectives, beliefs, ways of interpreting situations, or a sense of empathy between individuals. It may also arise when both parties perceive that they will benefit from taking a particular course of action. When people feel understood and recognize shared benefits, they are more willing to cooperate and to be influenced by one another. The founders of a business play a particularly crucial role in shaping an organization's core values and cultural identity. From the earliest stages, the way founders think, make decisions, and behave establishes the initial norms that exert a lasting influence on how the enterprise operates. These values are transmitted to subsequent generations of employees through observable behavior, internal stories, and organizational practices. Effective leaders possess the ability to exert strong influence over others. Through their experience, professional competence, and sense of direction, leaders can guide employees to act in ways that align with the norms and expectations of the organization. Beyond task supervision, leaders also play a mediating role between employees' personal philosophies and values and the firm's core philosophy and values, thereby fostering shared understanding and behavioral alignment across the organization. In a volatile and rapidly changing business environment, safeguarding ethical values and corporate culture also serves to protect leaders themselves. These values reflect the beliefs, principles, and standards that leaders uphold, while enabling the organization to maintain consistency in decision-making and behavior even under pressure for change. In particular, when faced with temptations related to material benefits, financial gain, and short-term profits, leaders must remain fully aware of their role-modeling responsibility. Upholding and preserving the positive values embedded in corporate culture not only sustains organizational identity but also reduces the risk of unethical behavior, preventing the firm from being driven by immediate gains that may cause long-term harm. The influence of leaders plays a decisive role in shaping an organization's ethical culture. Within organizations, employees do not merely listen to what leaders say, they also observe very carefully how leaders behave in practice. Through this process, employees learn by observation, imitation, and gradual internalization, which ultimately leads to the formation of shared behavioral norms within the organization. For example, if a department head frequently arrives late or leaves early, this behavior may unintentionally create a culture of weak time discipline within that department. When leaders themselves fail to comply with time regulations, employees may perceive lateness as acceptable, reasoning that, if the boss behaves this way, there is no need for us to be strict. By contrast, a leader who is conscientious, disciplined, and ethical is fully aware of their role as a role model. Such leaders strive to arrive on time, work seriously, and comply with organizational rules first, recognizing that only by setting a good example can they legitimately manage and require employees to follow suit. When leaders themselves arrive late or leave early, they lose moral legitimacy when reminding or disciplining employees. The ethics of leaders are not primarily demonstrated through speeches or formal statements, but rather through their daily actions, decisions, and interactions. It is these concrete behaviors that most powerfully shape and reinforce an organization's ethical culture. Transactional leaders are primarily concerned with accomplishing assigned tasks and ensuring that organizational objectives are met efficiently. They know how to guide, direct, and support employees in order to achieve shared goals, and they perform their duties within their scope of authority in an effective manner. Leadership effectiveness in this sense is typically measured by business outcomes, labor productivity, target achievement, and the stable operation of the organization. Transactional leaders focus on performance, control, and results, often relying on clear structures, rewards, and sanctions to motivate employees. By contrast, transformational leaders, often described as ethical leaders, place ethical values at the center of management and decision-making. They are concerned not only with outcomes, but also with people. Transformational leaders respect employees, protect their dignity and legitimate rights, and recognize human values as integral to organizational success. Rather than pursuing performance at any cost, they emphasize how goals are achieved, viewing integrity, fairness, and ethical conduct as equally important as business effectiveness. When employees are placed at the center of leadership attention, they feel respected, heard, and empowered. This, in turn, strengthens employee commitment and sense of responsibility at work. Such an environment not only enhances productivity, but also improves service quality, as employees are more motivated to serve customers well when they operate within a fair, ethical, and humane organizational culture. A centralized organizational structure is one in which power and decision-making authority